And just to remind you, I am trying to give like a framework, but these books are so beautiful. I'm almost just too heartbroken to do the overview because I don't want you to just be like, oh, well, that's all there's to Amos, and just like log that away and never look at it again. I hope that it will be like, oh, I think I could understand Amos if I tried. You know, does that make sense? Where it's like, okay, now I got big sort of picture. Let me begin Amos, okay? And you should see those key pieces that I've got through this as you read. Okay, so we're going to look at Hosea now. Hosea was during the exact same time as Amos. Okay, he was a co-preacher, but he was from the north. Okay, interesting, talking with Mac in the in-between. Totally forgot. When he mentioned fire, because the Holy Spirit had him mention fire, because I totally forgot. When we're talking about these two prophets, the Jeroboam II is after that Ahab story that I had put up, where God sent what? From heaven? Fire, right? So when God threatens to send fire, Mac was saying, like, gosh, do you think they would listen? And it's like, yeah, okay. But within a few generations of kings turning over, or, you know, just a couple years of time, do not we forget, as societies, what happens, okay? So the same thing is happening in Hosea. We pick up about halfway through the king history with Jeroboam II. But previous to this time, if you're like, well, I thought he sent prophets the whole time. Previous to this, the main two prophets that are ministering to the north are Elijah and Elisha. Okay? They didn't take time to write a book. Okay? They must have just been too busy. I don't know. Okay? But we have lots of stories of other people watching them do stuff and they write it down. And that's what we see in Kings and Chronicles. Okay? When they have died, that's when Amos and Hosea pop up. Okay? It's interesting how there's always really that one light, you know. Two lights. There's a few lights. There's those people in your life that are pointing you to the Lord. Okay? And Hosea and Amos are doing that for a generation. Hosea is probably one of the most famous prophets. Do you feel like you have a little bit of a, have you heard the story of Hosea? Mm-hmm. Hosea and probably Jonah, I would say, are probably the most well-known story-wise, okay, because there is just a little bit of narrative, not just their sermons written down or their prophecies written down. Now, remember, prophets can do forthtelling and foretelling. When we studied Amos, what mainly was there in what I said to you about those messages? Was it forthtelling or foretelling? Forthtelling. Good. Forthtelling. It was a lot about obedience, wasn't it? Okay? It was like, today, stopping like this. Do right. Okay? Make this flood of right living. Okay? That is God's primary heart. But then it does talk about Judgment Day, you know. Anyway, we're seeing some of these prophet characteristics come out now as we study. Okay, so the story of Hosea is a very sad one. Okay, and my favorite teacher on the prophets that I've heard that I referenced before, his name was Mr. Hatch. When he taught about Hosea, he said, in the Old Testament, there's no clearer picture of God's love than Hosea's story, okay? He said, up until the cross, okay, there's no clearer picture of God's love, okay? And many of you are going to understand that in this room. My high schoolers don't understand this story as well as they could because of the idea of covenant, okay? So, can somebody just give me the gist of what happens to Hosea? Does anybody remember? Something to do. Go ahead.
He marries a prostitute, or he's told to.
Yes. Mm-hmm. He's told to marry either a woman that ends up becoming a prostitute or maybe just a prostitute. It's a little bit unclear. Okay? Which is like a disaster. Right? It says around here, it's hard to read, it says, a living sermon illustration for God by marrying and loving a prostitute. That's like his mission. Okay, on our little Facebook profile. Sorry, that was for our break. I took it early to be nice to you. So on our Facebook profiles, sometimes we'll have a status, like what they're posting, you know, and this is what he's like. This is what his life is about, or his mission. It's pretty telling if you look in chapter 1, verse 2. In the ESV, Mac, sorry, but I'm going to choose the ESV for this because there are bad words in this. And who doesn't like to hear bad words from the Bible? Our high schoolers are always like, oh, read it, oh, read it. Does anybody want to read for me? In chapter 1, verse 2, when the Lord first spoke through Hosea, the Lord said to Hosea, go, take yourself a wife of whoredom, was the ESV, right, and have children of whoredom, for the land commits great whoredom by forsaking the Lord. You guys understand this because I think most of you have marriage covenant knowledge or children covenant knowledge, and you've lived with the potential nightmare in the back of your mind of like how painful it would be if anything were to happen to your marriage or to your children. Or if that person in your life were to suddenly harden their heart against you and just, wreak havoc with your love. Okay. This is what God chooses to show the people of Israel how it feels to him when they run after spiritual loves. Okay? When they run after spiritual loves, they are like Gomer. Okay? See what's in her heart? She has a skull in her heart. It's very interesting. The story is a little bit hard to piece together. If you've ever read the book Redeeming Love, it's like it's laid out. I know, and it's powerful. The story, if you read through Hosea, it's a little bit harder to just like flip by, see how it happens. Like this happens first, this, etc. But you definitely see two big things happen. Okay, the first thing is Gomer starts having babies. Okay, the first one is named Jezreel. Okay, which is a place that God is going to judge his people. Okay, the second baby, literally, is named Not Mine. Okay. Oop. I'm naming them out of order. I'm sorry. Second one is called, can you tell me? No Mercy. Still so sad. No Mercy. Oh, No Mercy. It's funny. Somebody was teasing with me about my name. Who was it? Was it you, Charlie? Charlie? Is that right? You were teasing. You said your name is Faith. Yeah. It'd be funny if I was like, because she said my name was Joy, and I'd be like, Sadness. My name is Sadness. If you've seen that movie Inside Out, there's like a person named Sadness. I mean, these names, No Mercy, place of God's judgment. And then the last one is Not Mine. Not my people. Not mine. Okay? So when Gomer has babies and two of them are named No Mercy and Not Mine, as they progress, there's some confusion as to when they're not Hosea's, but eventually by the last one, they are not Hosea's. Like you can tell when the baby's born, it's like, this is not my child. And the world knows, and nobody's, gonna think it's mine. So Hosea lives in the nightmare over years of time of being a prophet whose wife is cheating on him, and everybody knows it. Okay? And he's living with these kids that at least two of them, if not all of them, are not his child. But you know how much you sacrifice for children. You're like, this isn't even my kid. The pain every day of that in your face. Like, this is my wife's infidelity. Or you know what we call those babies. Okay? So eventually, she leaves and she doesn't come back. She's not at all attending the children, and he is alone taking care of them. And she gets either entrenched into sexual slavery, or has become just so debased that she sold herself into normal slavery. But when you flip to Hosea chapter 3, she's living with another man. Okay, in verse 1, and the Lord said to me, go again, love a woman who is loved by another man and is an adulteress, even as the Lord loves the children of Israel, though they turn to other gods, and this is so funny, and they love cakes of raisins. It was part of their little rituals to their idols. Some people say because raisins were an aphrodisiac in their culture. Okay, verse 2. So I bought her for 15 shekels of silver, and a homer and a lepek of barley. And I said to her, you must dwell as mine for many days. You shall not play the whore. It's like an act. Play the whore. Or belong to another man. So will I also be to you. That amount there in my study Bible, the note, it says, the amount paid is not great. And it shows the desperate condition into which Gomer has fallen. It's not worth very much. But he buys her to show why. Why does he buy her? What is the purpose again? Go love her even as, do you remember in verse 1? Love a woman, and then it go down just a little bit, even as the Lord. Remember, this is to the context. All bad. All bad. Deep entrenched idolatry. That's a terrible system where those people are just like, we're just forgetting about you and coming to all this instant gratification. Interesting because God chose this metaphor of this sexually immoral woman when his people literally are being sexually immoral in order to worship their gods. And God's one of my study Bible notes, it had said, notice the difference between the lifeless Baals or idols and the heart of God. The ones that the idols don't really care. And God's like, my heart is so connected to you. He chose covenant illustrations that we all understand. Children, marriage, those are our deepest, deep in you. Okay, and God's like, that's how I feel. It's heart. It matters. If you run to American idolatry, it matters to God's heart. He feels it. It's painful to him. and he's calling you to himself. Okay? These people have put probably children in the fire. Some of them. And God called to them. This is a beautiful basis for the crisis pregnancy centers. Like, oh, do they know this part of the Bible? Because God calls to those that have done the unforgivable in our eyes. He calls them to himself. Cool thing happens as you go through. God talks about the kids, and he eventually will get to Gomer. He said, okay, Jose, I want you to change the name Jezreel, the place of where I'm going to bring my judgment. I want you to change his name. Change it to reconciled. A place where they're going to be home instead of judged. Okay, and then the next one. That child, No Mercy. Switch her name and name her Mercy. That kid not mine. That's clearly not yours. Name him mine. My people. God does a name change to the kids. He also does this thing to Gomer, where he declares, he tells, through, it's interesting because the two things are paralleling, where this is the difficulty of the book. It's hard to tell where Hosea does it and where God is saying it in its hand towards his people. But God declares this for his people and thus expects Hosea to do this for Gomer. He declares his love for his people and he says, I will make you my wife forever. You cheater people that deserve my wrath. Showing you righteousness and justice, unfailing love and compassion. In one verse he says, I will betroth you to me forever. Okay? It's like reaffirming the wedding vows. Okay? Interesting. God does those changes in the relationship with their names and their identity and God's commitment to them. Okay, it's interesting, in a French camp where we live, there's a lot of adopted children that end up coming to us. And it's sort of puzzling to us because a lot of them have come from, they were rescued or they're adopted. And, sometimes from Russian orphanages or, just right from a hospital in America from the birth mom and then to this happy little Christian family. But they grow up and somehow like gratitude and bonding and I don't know, between being rescued and then when they become a teenager, somewhere in there they do not want relationship with their families. Okay, and they do really terrible things, act out, and so this sweet little Christian families don't know what to do, and so they send them to French camp sometimes, to our school. And I heard a preacher talking about it one time, and he had an adopted son himself, and he was saying, he's like, all adopted children have the choice if they're going to bond with their new family or not. It's not innate. It's like they have to kind of like decide it sometimes. Okay, and he paralleled it with us in Christ. He's like, we're adopted. We deserved wrath. God scoops us up into his family and calls us his own. But it's like, we look at him and we're like, oh, I don't know if you mean it. I'm not sure if you're... And there's this choice somewhere in there, even if you think about it in terms of Gomer, once you become an adulterer, would you come and receive forgiveness? That's a humbling thing to do. we in the story are the kids, that grow up in the story. They're rebellious. Okay? And the wife in the story, she's a cheater. That's us. This is not very complimentary of us. But it is so full of hope because God's love reaches underneath it all. That is so beautiful. It's so amazing. And today, God wants you to bond with him back and receive the forgiveness and be like, yes, I want to be yours. I do. I want to be your daughter. I want to live like a daughter. I want to live like a faithful wife in my heart. Okay, like not from, maybe my idols aren't as outward as theirs, but there's all kinds of American idols for us to bow down to. Just finally, remember this is my God symbol, okay? There's a point in Hosea chapter 11. Hosea chapter 11 in verse 8. Hosea 11 verse 8. Where God is like, whew, okay, he's been going back and forth throughout the book of Hosea, being angry at their sin, and then he'll be like, but I care about you so much. And he's just said right before this, he's talked about how when Israel was a child, I held him by the arms and I taught him to walk. Like he's being so paternal and fatherly, okay? But at the same time, they're not responding to him. He's getting so angry. And you know how we can be that way with our children or our spouses. If they sin against us, it's very painful. But in verse 8, God has this like heart-rending experience, okay, where he's like, how can I give you up, O Ephraim, which is one of the tribes of North? How can I hand you over, O Israel? Okay, skip down just 2 lines. My heart recoils within me. My compassion grows warm and tender. I will not execute my burning anger. I will not again destroy Ephraim. For I am God and not a man, the Holy One in your midst, and I will not come in wrath. Okay? So at the time when he's preaching, it's like, it's going to be held off another day. My heart is breaking within me. I love you, but I'm mad. Okay? And that tension of you want to be loving and compassionate, so painful, and you want to hold your person to a standard. Okay, God knew at this point, it says, the great father and husband to his people. This is a quality we'll learn about God. But God knew at this point, even now, what it was going to cost him in order to be both holy and compassionate. Okay, when he loved his people and they're so full of sin, it's like tearing the heart of God in two, okay? And literally, soon, down the line of the Bible history, you see God's heart really break, okay? To love sinful people, what it's going to cost him. Okay, we're going to do Jonah real quick. Gotta move forward here. Okay, Jonah is probably one of the most familiar prophets, so I'm going to do it pretty quickly because this should be pretty familiar to you. God calls Jonah a little bit differently than normal prophets, okay? Because he's not called to go to God's people. He is one of God's people, and he goes to, does anybody remember? Where is he going? Nineveh. Okay, Nineveh was the capital city of a very scary enemy on the horizon. Can you take a guess? Assyria. Very good. The people that were going to eventually come take them over. Okay, the ISIS people. Okay. Jonah was a little bit after this period of Amos and Hosea, and he definitely had heard on the news about Assyria. If not, had people that he loved somehow distantly connected to some kind of violence, okay? Because Assyria, by the end of the Northern Kingdom, was starting to really muscle up against the North, okay? So when Jonah gets called to go to Nineveh, we got to think of it as if you tonight in your bed, God tells you clear as anything, and you just know it, that he wants you to go to Iraq and to try and speak to ISIS people about Jesus Christ, to be like, no, the no is very understandable here, okay? So he says no, and he gets on a boat, and he goes as far as he can in the opposite direction. Okay, but we all know how that turns out, okay? Terrible storm, he gets thrown in the water by the sailors. He seems very heartless about it all. And though he should have died in the sea, God sends this big old whale to swallow him up. Okay, / fish, we're not sure. Okay, when he's in the fish, he prays this amazing prayer where he sounds very pious and very like, yes, salvation belongs to the Lord. Okay, because God has kept him from dying, but he's also in the belly of a fish. So I'm not sure exactly, how he's processing this, but most of all, he's yielded to God, okay, where he had been in pretty deep rebellion to what God has asked him to do. Okay, but, he most definitely is going to die in the belly. Okay, but that's not what happens. God has the fish spit him up, and Jonah obeys the call a second time. Okay, he goes to Nineveh, and he preaches a very brief sermon. He's like, repent, or in 40 days, the city's going to burn. Okay, well, the king, everybody down below him, they believe him. Okay, and they actually respond. You can't see it too well, but they're all bowing down, and they're struck to the heart by God's convicting spirit, and they actually come to faith. Okay, but the problem is, Jonah doesn't like this. Okay, it's interesting that, if I were to stand up here and teach you and be so mad at you because you were responding well, no, I don't want you to get this. He didn't want them to respond, and he actually sat up on this hill waiting to see, hopefully God will make them burn. Please, God, please change your mind. Please make them burn. Okay, it's like, that's so terrible. Okay, but he actually finishes with this whole idea, where this vine had grown up over him, and a worm had come and chewed it, and so it shriveled. Okay, didn't have as much comfort as he did while he was watching to hope that it would burn. He was sad about this vine that had died. So God asked him at the very end of the book, he says, man, you've been so concerned about this vine dying. You have so much compassion on it. Shouldn't I be concerned about all these people in this town? Okay. There's 120,000 people, it says, that don't know their right hand from their left, like they're probably innocent, like so far as their baby children. They don't know right from left. Okay, God's not looking just to he's not eager to do that. Okay, so in the book of Jonah, we have this interesting thing where you see Jonah very excited to receive mercy for himself when he's in the fish belly. But when God wants to extend it to somebody that's Jonah's enemy, he's like, burn them up. And Jonah was a prophet. It's convicting. Okay? Because our own enemies, will we extend the mercy we so eagerly want and very gladly receive? But would we extend it to those we cannot stand, have an ideological problem with, or people that are truly terribly violent, and would we even accept that they would come to faith? I read this story in Samaritan's Purse's newsletter. Somebody had found me and gave it to me because Samaritan's Purse, the Franklin family. Okay, so they had been over in Iraq outside of Mosul, treating ISIS victims, like gunshots, pulling out gunshots from people that have been shot by ISIS, specifically little children, okay, which is just so hard to fathom. that, ISIS would shoot little children as they run away from them. But so they had pictures of like this little child with her back, with bandage on her back, and in the addition it said, and we've actually also had several injured ISIS people in our little hospital that we have, and 3 of them have accepted Jesus as their Savior. I did not say praise the Lord. Okay? Because I was like, they've been shooting children in the back. You know what I'm saying? Like, no. They can't just, oh, yeah, Jesus is the Savior. You see what I'm saying? This is the idea here that's like, you have got to be kidding me. Really? That leads us to our last prophet. Okay, Nahum.
Joy, what was the scripture reference on that?
Yes, sir. Jonah 4:10 and 11.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Nahum, this is so interesting. Nahum and Jonah are both to the same city, but they're about 100 years apart. And Nahum and Jonah really need to be studied together, because I don't think I would like Jonah very much if I didn't have Nahum. Okay. And Nahum helps me with my ISIS story, okay? So Nahum actually goes to Assyria, to the capital, to Nineveh, well after there's been the deportation of the north. So the north is actually no more, okay? There's no more northern kingdom of Israel. They've been like exiled out to all over the place or killed, okay? So Nahum comes telling the city that the city and the nation that's the strongest, at the time, the strongest world power, he's telling them, God's done. Okay? That's what it says. Your time is up. If you want to open to Nahum for our last prophet of the night, that would be awesome. Now we'll end on time, no matter what I'm saying. Nahum's real small. It's hard to find. Between Habakkuk and Micah. Okay. This is what I'm gonna read just the very first part here. Okay. So Nahum, same place as Jonah. He goes like 100 years later. Okay. Now, people can forget some things and they can walk away from faith in 100 years. No doubt. Okay, the revival of Jonah is well behind Assyria's history, and they've embraced that bloody violence intensely. This is what he says, Nahum 1, and I'm going to start in verse 2, his message here. The Lord is a jealous and avenging God. The Lord is avenging and wrathful. The Lord takes vengeance on his adversaries and keeps wrath for his enemies. The Lord is slow to anger and great in power, and the Lord will by no means clear the guilty. His way is in the whirlwind and the storm, and the clouds are the dust of his feet. He rebukes the sea and makes it dry. He dries up all the rivers. I'm going to just go on down to verse 5. The mountains quake before him, the hills melt. The earth heaves before him, the world and all who dwell in it. Who can stand before his indignation? Who can endure the heat of his anger? His wrath is poured out like fire, and the rocks are broken into pieces by him. The Lord is good, a stronghold in the day of trouble. He knows those who take refuge in him. But with an overwhelming flood, he will make a complete end of the adversaries. He will pursue his enemies into darkness. I'm going to tell you why I like Nahum. I like Nahum. It's fun. People don't like Nahum in America. I think it's because they don't watch the news enough. But they don't like it. It's interesting to me. You know who I think would like Nahum? The Christians in Iraq that have been persecuted for loving Jesus by ISIS. And they're like, is God going to do anything? God's powerful accountability in the Bible is like, some people in this world, it's their lifeblood. It's what they hope for. Like the POWs, the people locked away in China that are, persecuted church and that are just like, God, you keep track every time. Every time they torture me, you will make it right. One day, you will make it right. But it's so interesting how those that have gone through such horrendous pain and suffering, like I think of Corrie ten Boom, if you've read any of her or have heard of her, she was able to do what I consider just impossible, and she did too. After she got out of a concentration camp, she had watched her sister die in World War II in the concentration camp, and her and her sister had hid Jews in their home. And anyway, much later she was speaking, and on the circuit she was talking to different churches, and a German soldier that she recognized from the concentration camp came up to her at the end, and he reached out his hand and said, "Oh, I have accepted Jesus like you have spoken of. I have accepted Jesus." And she describes the experience because she knew he didn't recognize her many years later. She was like a skeleton in the concentration camp, but normal then. And she said she just could not lift her arm to shake his hand. And she just prayed, she was like, "Oh God, you're gonna have to lift my hand. Like you're gonna have to lift up my hand to shake his hand." That supernatural forgiveness is in Nahum. And she did. She shook his hand. She said the love of God flooded through her in a really unique way. This is real hard to see. I'm just going to go through here. This huge judgment, it's okay. This huge judgment that I just read is waiting for those who do not take refuge in the Lord. Okay? Did you hear that little part? The Lord is good, a stronghold in the day of trouble. He knows those who take refuge in him. This is verse 7 and 8. But with an overwhelming flood, he will make a complete end of the adversaries. This is such an interesting thing here, where he will not clear the guilty, it says in verse 3. Okay? God will not let anyone on this earth off for what they have done, ever. Unless, this last verse, listen, can we turn it off just for this last one? Unless you see in verse 7, unless they come and find refuge in the judge that brings justice. That's the only place that's safe from God's wrath. Okay? A lot of times my kids will draw a cross underneath God here. Okay? In God's wrath and his love, in both those things, they made perfect at the cross, and that is where we take refuge. All of us, all of humanity, doesn't matter what it is. Jesus' blood is enough to wipe away the worst of humanity's evils. Okay? So it's exactly right when you guys amen about those ISIS things. It's amazing. It's just the power of God's real mercy. Not that he sweeps it under the rug, but that Jesus' blood is that valuable that it can even forgive that. So both those things together, okay, they help me because I know that God's not just letting it go. It costs something. It costs him something, okay, and we can praise him for that. Let me pray for us now. Let's go. Daddy God, thank you so much for the Old Testament. Thank you for how it points forward and it shows so many beautiful things about you. Thank you that it takes us deeper in love and adoration, and it just enriches our praise for you. Please, Lord, make our feet walk the path. Help us to not turn by inches or by big old turns, Lord, but help us to walk with you faithfully and just praise you for all the goodness that you pour into our life when we do. Thank you for all these wonderful people paying such great attention. And I pray that you'd just blossom these truths in their hearts, Lord. We love you. In your name, amen. Amen.
Thank you.